Joining me live now is Ukraine's ambassador to Australia, Vasyl Myroshnychenko. Vasyl, great to see you. First of all, this big change in US policy, how does that change things on the ground in Ukraine?
Well, yesterday, Russians have launched one of the most intensive missile and drone attacks at Ukrainian energy facilities, at Ukrainian housing and other infrastructure. Millions of Ukrainian children and their parents were meeting there Sunday morning in the bomb shelters. Severe damage. We managed to intercept some of those, but many have reached the targets and making it extremely difficult for us to survive this winter, imposing more pressure on the civilian population. The decision by the United States is very welcome. We'll see how it will develop in the battlefield. One of the reasons behind that decision is probably the deployment of the North Korean troops to Russia and the escalation of this conflict from what we see it. But you have to keep in mind the range of those missiles is still 300 kilometers. But if that will enable Ukraine to hit out some of the legitimate military targets, which will be in that range.
What is the significance of North Korea and North Korean troops? Are they effective?
I think it's of major significance, especially here in the Indo-Pacific. We see how this conflict is changing. Already now, the outcome of this war will define security architecture globally for the next several decades, but it will definitely change the situation here in the Indo-Pacific. And now with North Korea, Russians have been buying their ammunition, they've been buying their missiles, and also providing in exchange some defense technology. Now we see the deployment of those troops, and it is providing North Korea additional edge, and that edge comes from the experience from combat their troops going to get, but also the fact that Russia is tapping into these resources is also telling what's the motivation behind it. But definitely North Korean leader will be emboldened in the future, knowing that Russia will come to their defense, having signed the security and defense agreement. And that's is of vital interest to Australian government in seeing how the security situation can change here in the region.
Vasyl, what does Trump change in your view? Does his election bring mixed feelings for you, or do you think he will be good for Ukraine and ending the war?
We rely on American decisive leadership with the Trump administration. It's difficult to preempt what's going to be his policy on Ukraine, on Russia, on Europe, and on others' foreign policy. However, we try to be optimistic. His view of the world and his view to foreign affairs as peace through strength is something that we see aligned with other priorities, and we see that that can help us end the war. It's difficult to speculate how that's going to be developing. However, we remain optimistic. And of course, President Zelensky congratulated President Trump. They had a good meeting on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in September. And we'll see how it will be all shaping up.
Yeah, so one of the first phone calls was to the Ukraine president. And on that phone call, Elon Musk joined. Was that a positive step? Like, how did you read that? It's
difficult to give an analysis of the role that Elon Musk can play in this. He was one of the biggest donors to Trump's campaign. Apparently, there will be a role for him in the new administration. We already heard about that.
Yeah, I mean, he's head of efficiency, right? And we've heard Trump talk about him not wanting to spend billions and billions of dollars on foreign wars, therefore on pumping money into Ukraine. Does that make you nervous?
It's, this 1,000 days of this Russian war, something that nobody expected would last longer than 10 days. We've already gone through that. I can assure you that Ukrainians will not be surrendering. We will not be giving up. It's a matter of survival for us. We'll carry on fighting, and we understand that we don't have any other option. And we rely on American leadership to stay out there with us, because it's a much bigger war. It's not just a war against Ukraine. It's a war against liberal democracies. And we see how dictators are waging that. And we see with all these attacks that Putin has been mounting on our civilian infrastructure. And he's a war criminal indicted by International Criminal Court. And that must end, because Russia, to ensure peace in Europe and beyond, Russian aggression cannot be rewarded. It must fail.
Yes, Ukraine relies on American leadership, absolutely. It also relies on American money too. If that was to be reduced or pulled, what effect would that have?
That will be very difficult for Ukraine, that's for sure. And being the biggest contributor to Ukraine's defense capabilities, we will work with our European partners on that. I just hope that will not happen and that America will stay in there and will help us repel that attack and make sure that we can restore rules-based international order and make sure that Russian aggression is not rewarded in Ukraine.
And we will see. Vasyl, always good to talk to you. Great to have you back on AM Agenda. No doubt we will speak very soon.
Thanks for having me.